Welcome to the Gone Jeepin' Show with your hosts, Rick Payway and Tracy Clark. Grab your favorite beverage, kick back, put your feet up, and have a listen. We're all Jeep all the time. Welcome to episode 3 of the Gone Jeepin' Show. We've got a lot on tap for you this week. In All Jeep All the Time, Rick's talking about 80 years of Jeep history, Jeep Beat. We've got some more information on Easter Jeep Safari 2021, a new vendor show at Dixie 4-Wheel Drive in Moab, and the new Jeep Half Door. Willys versus Wrangler, Liam and Rick face off on carbureted versus fuel injection. In Toolbox Talk, we've got toe straps, recovery straps, and kinetic straps. Stay tuned and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Gone Jeepin' Show. I'm your host, Rick Payway.
And I'm your co-host, Tracy Clark.
Today we're joined with most of our crew from GoneJeepin.com. We got Liam and Michael and Tyler and Greg and Chris. How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. Cold.
Awesome.
Cool. You're cold. That's because you're in Michigan.
Yeah, I think it's 0 out.
Liam?
Sounds about right. No, I'm good. I'm inside.
Oh, you're inside. So that's Mike, I think you're in Indiana. Yeah. Muted Mike. So let's see. I know Chris is in Northern California. Tyler's in middle of Utah. Tracy's in the middle of Colorado, and I'm in the middle of Arizona. Actually, I'm in the warm part, which is really kind of nice, and I'm going to keep it that way. We got a lot to get to today. It's really, really cool. I'm going to be talking about All Jeep All the Time. We're going to talk about 80 years of Jeep. If you can believe it, it's been 80 years. Then we'll get into Jeep Beat, where we do a little secret investigation. And then Willys versus Wrangler. We're going to talk about fuel injection versus carburetors. That's going to be a good one. And then we'll get to hopefully some toolbox talk. Get to talk about kinetic ropes and what that really means.
Recovery straps.
And recovery straps.
Yeah.
Are they the same? That's the question. Then hopefully we'll get to Trailside. That'll be a fun one because we're going to talk about the Rubicon, and then we'll finish up with lockers before light bars. We'll have a couple of reader questions from Instagram, Facebook, and start with that. So let me tell you about 80 years of Jeep. This is the year that the Jeep company, which is now Stellantis, that bought FCA, which used to be Chrysler, which before that was actually Chrysler Peugeot and all that other kind of stuff. So let me start in the beginning.
Yeah, back when you were a wee tot and your sandals were new.
Just about. Actually, my father had a 46 CJ2A, so that's part of the lineage. But before that, you got to remember that Jeep did not actually start in 1941. It was 1940, and it wasn't even called a Jeep. Not only that, the first Jeep did not have flat fenders. I know that's kind of heresy, but it's true. The first Jeep was a development of the Bantam Car Company and the Quartermaster Corps of the Army, because the Army needed a light utility vehicle. They couldn't deal with a half-ton truck. Horses were obsolete. Motorcycles just couldn't cut it. Because, well, obviously, you can't carry 4 people and a gun in a motorcycle very well. So during the 30s, the Army and Bantam came up with this idea to build a small, compact, quarter-ton 4x4. And the Army sent out bids to about 160 companies, and only 3 responded. And that was Ford, Willys, and Bantam. And Bantam was the only one that could make the prototype and deliver it to Camp Holabird, Maryland in, I believe, 49 days. So that happened. That was the first one. It was in September, I believe, 1940. So don't forget, 1941 is actually 81. No, what do we got? 80 days? 80 years of Jeep? It's 81. No matter what I'll tell you. However, Willys came along in November and produced their their quad, which was their prototype, and Ford came up with their Pygmy. So by the time 1941 came along, all the manufacturers were making Jeeps, and the word Jeep was coined. That's a whole nother show later. So what happened? We had a World War. Jeep was made famous by the war. Willys and Ford made about 250,000 apiece, identical vehicles. And the war ended, and Jeep said, "Well, we're gonna just keep making these things." It was called Willys Overland, and they made the first CJ2. That was in 1945. Called it the Agri Jeep. That was cool. And then
And we've actually got somebody that's got an Agri Jeep. So
that's true.
we'll have to get some walk around stuff for that.
And drive around with that. That'd be nice. And it is basically a demilitarized MB. And then the CJ2A came out, which they made tons of. That was during the 40s. In 1949, they transitioned to the CJ3A. So these are all flat fenders now. And also made the M38, which is the military version of the CJ3A. Then about 52, you got the CJ5 looking vehicle, which was the first military, CJ5 M38A1. Had the rounded fenders, had the overhead valve engine. And at the same time, they had the CJ3B, which was a flat fender with the overhead intake valve F134 engine. So,
yeah, commonly known as a high hood.
a high hood, a 3B. A lot of people think they're ugly. What do you guys think?
I think they're ugly.
Ugly. Come on, Chris.
They're kind of like an FC, a face only a mother can love.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so happens I actually bought a 3B because it was a weird one, and I have to have one of everything. So, yeah, I think it's ugly, but it's a pretty ugly. Like Tracy said, only a mother could love. All right, so we're still talking little Jeeps. What, Chris?
Why they did that, Rick, was for the engine, right? For the clearance.
Right. Because they went from the flathead, which is an L head, because of the way the valves are. They went to the F head, where they have the intake valves in the in the head, and the exhaust still in the block. So it raised the hood line about 4 inches. So that's all they did. Now, on the military model, of course, the CJ5 styling was already there. And later on in 55, when they came out with the actual CJ5, of course, they still use that engine. And the interesting thing is they used that engine all the way up till 1971. So that tells you about how many are out there and how durable and how good they really are. Whereas the flathead engine, they stopped around 64 or so, I believe. And they're in the two-wheel drive Surrey Jeeps. So Surrey Jeeps, two-wheel drive, fringe on top. Ugly? Not ugly. Come on.
Ugly.
Oh, come on. I think they're beautiful.
I think they're fun.
I mean, I
less ugly than
they're fun to drive. They're cute. They have their place. Fantasy Island kind of thing.
It makes you want to get a mint julep and just go tool around the island. Yep, Fantasy Island.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. So if you had a choice between a 3B and a Surrey, what would you take?
3B.
I would take the 3B because it kind of, the Surrey, while it is of Jeep lineage, the way it was styled and with the top and everything, it's kind of a glorified golf cart to me.
It really is.
Sorry, but
So we're gonna say no on the Surrey for Tracy.
no, the blue one I can tolerate more than the salmon pink one. But yeah,
turquoise blue, those are pretty.
Yeah, it's
all right, well, we're going off topic. We're going off topic. So anyway, here comes the CJ5. And mind you, I'm leaving out the trucks and the wagons and everything else because we're staying to the core of what Jeep always has been, which has been a small four-wheel drive, two-not door. Notice no doors because obviously it didn't come with doors other than fabric half doors. Remember that. We'll talk about some of that in the future. The World War II Jeeps did have fabric half doors. All right, so along comes 1955. We have the CJ5. The Willys Overland Company is now Kaiser Willys because the industrialist Henry Kaiser bought it. Remember, Jeep has always been somebody else's brand, okay? So by the time the 60s come along, excuse me, have your CJ5. They've already produced the CJ6, which is a longer 5. And they also had a Perkins diesel available. Who wants a Perkins diesel in their Jeep?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
In a heartbeat.
How long did it take for that first diesel until the new Eco diesel came out? What's that, 65 or something, 75, 85, 95? Oh, my God.
Million years.
That's a jillion
50,
years.
40 years, 50 years.
Yeah, but don't forget, Jeep had it first anyway.
So that
And right
Perkins,
around
Rick,
the beginning of the 60s, they had real competition. They had a Scout.
so they only made on that diesel, Rick, backing up just a hair, they only made 500 of those. I understand. I have a friend of mine that owns one. He bought it for like $1,000.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Mitch Carter, has one too. It's like, wow, I'd love to have one of those. So remember, the Scout came along and it was this competition. And then a couple of years later, what's worse is the Bronco came out in 66.
That's a double drink. We're going to get
That's going to drive me
squiffy.
to drink. So anyway, this is a condensed timeline of Jeep. I can't say it's a true history.
Yeah, but you forgot
Tell me.
something in there, though. The DJ5.
That's right. DJ3
So you have to double drink.
and DJ5, and they had a DJ6. And D was for dispatch Jeep. They were all two-wheel drives. They were different than the Surreys, which were two-wheel drives, because they didn't come with the fringe on top. They had either hard tops, no tops, and a whole variety of different things that you could just go crazy trying to figure them all out. So yeah, DJs were important. In fact, I have a 75 DJ5A, I think it is. Hard top, sliding doors, all the cool stuff except no front axle. But I got.
I know where you could
I'm
find a front
sure you
axle.
do.
Up there in Alaska at the Transportation Museum.
Right.
They had a beautiful
So
one
I
up
just said that DJ Postals didn't have four-wheel drive. Tracy reminded me. You're right. Alaskan ones did, and they had insulated hardtops. They're really special Jeeps. And yeah, anybody living in the cold country, yeah, that's something to have. You turn that into an overlander and live in it, never have to buy another hotel room again. But I digress. Again, so in the mid-60s,
yes.
along comes this company, says, you know, we need to buy a Jeep. And that was AMC. So by 70, 71 or so, AMC, American Motors Corporation, famous for making the Hornet, the Spirit, the Gremlin,
The Pacer.
Sir.
AMX.
Matador,
The fishbowl on wheels.
Matador, Hey Javelin, all kinds of cool oddball cars, right? They bought Jeep, which of course, therefore saved AMC. About that time, they said, okay, we got to put a V8 in these things because they had the Scouts and Broncos as competition. V8. Yeah, this is V8 juice in here. So out comes the CJ5 with the V8 and a straight 6, don't get me wrong. And that really made a difference in power to weight ratio. 304 CJ5 was just a hot rod. You could really rip up the gears. Literally, I rebuilt Born One T15 transmission.
That was one of my first. And once you slap 35s on that sucker, oh man,
You betcha.
Mm-hmm. You could tear stuff up real easy.
That was good stuff. So it came along. Now you have the CJ7 introduced in 1976 because people wanted an easier, longer vehicle, more creature comforts. It's got an automatic, has a full-time transfer case, and that was the high mark of Jeep production in my mind during that time. That lasted until about 86, and don't forget, you also had Scramblers, which were CJ8s. Those were cool too. That came along in early 80s, and they're actually pretty highly desirable now, although a lot of people cut them up to make them into trail rigs.
It's because Reagan drove one, so everybody wants one.
Absolutely.
My kingdom for a nice scrambler.
Yep. Freiberger, of course, David Freiberger, of course, had his and built it up and bobbed it, and everybody thought years later that was an abomination to kill a scrambler, but back then no one cared. Yep, there's a 304. Liam just reminded me that I forgot all about the Jeepsters. Yeah. Okay, so in the 60s, Jeepsters came with a V6. Buick 225 V6. More on that later. And then in 72 to 76, they came with a 304 V8. Liam has one of those, and he's going to be working on it here and tell us all kinds of stories. All right, so
Oh, yeah.
now let's get to the important part. The first Wrangler. For some people, they only know that Jeep makes Wranglers. They didn't know about CJ7s and 5s and all that stuff. First Wrangler was a YJ, and all that was an internal designation, just like the CJ was for civilian Jeep. YJ didn't mean anything.
Yeah, no Renegade, Laredo, stuff like that.
Nope, it was called Wrangler. So they came along with the YJ designation. People said, oh, well, that must mean Yuppie Jeep, because that was the time when Yuppies were popular, and it was a much, much improved CJ7 is really all it was. It had longer springs, a prettier interior if you're into that sort of thing. The biggest problem is it had rectangular headlights. Anybody knows real Jeeps have round headlights, and real Jeeps have flat fenders.
Round headlights.
Round headlights.
Poor YJ. The poor YJ just got beat up.
Oh, yeah.
It was a great rig.
I mean,
I know. Liam thinks it's hip to be square, so.
It's hip to be square. That's right.
Love it.
You know what?
But without the YJ, Jeep wouldn't have gotten as popular as it is today.
And again, that's true.
Very true. But, you can kind of, if you wanted to, lump the YJ in with the Cherokee, and the affectionate term for the XJ or the Cherokee is rolling dumpster. Now, don't get me wrong, I love them.
You bet. But you notice every XJ Cherokee came with rectangular headlights.
Yep.
How come no one has made a retro conversion grill so you can retrofit round headlights in it? I've done one.
You have?
Yeah. Well, okay, I did one side.
You can swap out a CJ7 front clip on the YJ.
No, I'm talking about it on an XJ.
On an XJ? Oh.
Yeah. But you're right. Really popular when they came out with YJs was to retrofit them with a CJ7 grill because it would actually work, and then you got round headlights back.
I think round headlights in an XJ would look a little funny. I don't know how you do it seamlessly because, everything on the front of the XJ is so squared off. It would.
Oh, dude, I did with zip ties and duct tape. It worked fine.
I saw somebody do one with a compass front end, and they put it on a XJ, and it looked horrible.
Well, if there's anybody that's up to the challenge, it would be Greg.
There you go.
Oh, I can do it. You send me the parts and send me some money, and I guarantee I'll put it together.
Yep. So again, AMC was being sold to Chrysler after Peugeot got their hands in it and screwed everything up. So another company comes along and basically saves Jeep, and that was right about that time. The XJ and the YJ saved Jeep yet again. So that goes on for a few years, about 10 years, and you have the new TJs.
Can I say something really quick? If
Sure.
Peugeot screwed it up before and now they're back, does that mean that history is going to repeat itself?
Well, you're supposed to learn from your mistakes, so we'll see what Stellantis does.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to interject there.
All right, so then comes the TJ. TJ is great, has round headlights, it has round springs, it lasts for 10 years, and we're in the country falls into the midst of a terrible recession. Jeep comes out with the JK. And I saw it during that time. I said, you're going to sell every one you make, because they also showed me the four-door ahead of time. It was awesome. And sure enough, the JK probably saved the Jeep line and the entire company, because nobody buys Chrysler cars, right? They buy Jeep, the Ram truck.
That's the totally cool soccer mobile.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Right now, there's more. Well, JKs have evolved into JLs. And now, yes, Stellantis is taking over. But thank God you had good Jeep engineers and good Jeep development people that stayed with us. And I think, Greg, you know quite a few of the ones that we're talking about because that held the Jeep torch and gave us fold-down windshields, removable doors, and now a Jeep pickup with a removable roof. And,
if any of the listeners to this podcast
and diesel. And now we also have a 392 V8 back in a Jeep. So you see, that's 81 years of Jeep. I'd say they did a good job. And that's why here on Gone Jeepin', because we love Jeep.
Yeah, and if any of the listeners to this podcast tune into the Gone Jeepin' YouTube channel, they'll see we recently posted a video that's only available here on Gone Jeepin' that showcases a couple of those engineers and some of the stories from back in the YJ days and earlier days.
Yes.
And sadly, we did lose an icon in the industry last week. And our thoughts and prayers are with family and close friends and colleagues of Phil Fuzzy Tony. And until our trails intersect again, wheel easy, my friend.
Absolutely. So we can say, here's to Phil.
To Phil.
Absolutely. Love you, Phil.
Yep. He was a treasure. So that
probably worth mentioning. It's probably worth mentioning that people that don't know about Phil should go to our Gone Cheapin' channel, YouTube channel, because Greg did a nice little interview with him just a few.
Yep, that's going to be hitting quickly, so that'll be good. You should always look on your Gone Cheapin' videos. Go to the YouTube.
Yes, check out YouTube. We got good stuff. Good stuff. Let's segue into Jeep Beat. I'm going to kind of jump in here on. We touched on the last episode on Easter Jeep Safari, and it was a roller coaster of a ride. I mean, I don't know if I want to get an all-day pass to that one. That was insane. Tuesday, 2 days ago from the recording of this podcast, the Grand County Commissioners did amend the ordinance, and they approved the permit. So Easter Jeep Safari is a go. We will not have the standard Big Saturday lineup downtown. It will be from designated trail departure locations as they are throughout the week. But we are getting an Easter Jeep Safari. We are not getting a vendor show. Gone Jeepin', 99% of us, I do believe, if not 100% of us, are going to be in attendance. So you have to check our Facebook and social media pages. I think we may have a couple of meet and greets and maybe even a couple of giveaways while we're out there. The vendor show is not happening, which kind of ends with the big raffle that they had, the big drawing. They are still going to do the drawing, but it will not be held at the arena. It's going to be virtual. You do have to be present to win, which means you've got to tune into the Red Rock Four Wheelers Facebook page. And you'll get your tickets just like you normally would during registration for your trails and stuff like that. They will call your number. You're going to have to make comments or something like that. They're still working out the details. Then your prize, rather than having to figure out how to cart it home, will at this point in time be directly drop shipped from manufacturers. So stay tuned to the Red Rock Four Wheelers Easter Jeep Safari Facebook page, and they will be releasing more information on that as we get closer to the event.
That's actually really good news.
Yeah, and speaking of vendor show, I'm hearing that Dixie four-wheel drive over in San Juan County, which is just on the southern edge of Moab, maybe another 3 or 4 miles past the arena where the vendor show normally was, is picking up the slack and having a vendor show. Greg, have you got some information on that?
Yes. So just like you said, just outside of, actually, it's I think about 1.5 miles, but somewhere between 1.5 miles and 3 miles further south from the arena, on the left-hand side, is Dixie four-wheel drive, which is a beautiful off-road shop. And they are throwing a vendor show because they wanted to fill the void. They wanted to help out where they could because they're a local shop. So I think they have, I don't remember the exact number, but well over 100 booths and semis, and Ford's going to be there with Broncos and a bunch of other companies. So I know I know of at least 25 to 30 companies that have already signed up. And I will be there at the vendor show the entire time because I'm helping put it on. But yeah, it's not the same vendor show that we're used to at the arena that we've all gotten super comfortable with, but it is a new one. It's going to be really exciting. And it's basically just to fill the void. They wanted to help out where they could, and they wanted to kind of keep their tradition alive, even though it couldn't be done at the arena, which is inside, and it'll still be a vendor show, just a little bit further south out of town. And I'll be there. I think a couple other of the Gone Jeep and crew are going to pop in and, maybe hang out and work a little bit, but we're going to have a lot of fun, and hope to see everybody there.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if anybody's familiar with the landscape in Moab, if you know where what we affectionately call Jeep on a Stick, which is an old flat fender that's set up on top of a large post way up in the air, the Dixie 4-wheel drive is on the opposite side of the highway before you get to that area. So
about a mile before you get to there.
Yeah, if you get to Jeep on a Stick, turn around and come back to the vendor show.
Oh, yeah, I don't think you'll be able to miss it. The amount of semis that are already slated to park right out front, as well as Bronco. I think Bronco is bringing 40 Broncos.
Oh God!
Yeah, it's a lot of drinking.
So, need some more coffee.
Yeah. Now it is not a Red Rock 4-wheeler show, but it's definitely a vendor show. And I'm really excited to be a part of it and be able to be there.
And it's outside, right, Greg?
It's 100% outside.
Yeah. So no COVID problems.
They have done everything they have to make sure that all the permits were in order and that all rules are followed. One of the really nice things is in the process of getting the vendors, one of the things that they've asked, because they're not doing a raffle, they're not doing any of that like Red Rock does, but they have asked the vendors to provide face masks and gaiters and everything else. So even if you come to Moab and you don't have one, but you still want to be safe, you're more than welcome to come by the vendor show and pick up a gaiter or 2 or 3 or whatever you need. Those will be free as well because they want to do everything they can to be 100% in compliance and help people who aren't prepared.
Yeah, and it is, if it's not state, then it is definitely Grand County and City of Moab. You have to have a mask. When you're out in public, you have to wear one. So,
yeah, anytime you walk into any building, when we were there in October, all buildings, you had to wear a mask when you went in. So, definitely make sure that you're prepared. We are in this pandemic. We do have to, follow some of the rules. I have asthma, so I'm convenient. Most places I don't have to wear a mask, but I still do it out of respect for other people when I need to. So it's a big thing that we respect other people in this current situation we're in our country.
And I know that the City of Moab did approve the Walker drug permit for the Jeep display, and I think Chris has a little more information on what Jeep's planning to do out there. So it will still be Jeep Safari. Jeep's going to be there.
Yep.
Yeah. So Jeep, it's been off again, on again, but Jeep is completely committed to having a strong presence there. They'll be out again with their concept vehicles. So they've got their 6 or 7, really cool concepts, which get pretty crazy. I mean, we've seen the Mighty FC and the M7, what was it, M715? Oh yeah, yeah. So it's
for the lower 40 and all the other ones. Yep.
Yeah, and
the lower 40.
And we've got stuff that we didn't get to see last year because we were deprived of EJS. So,
and one of those was the 392, right?
Yeah.
And,
yep.
So they'll have the 392 out there. They're going to have 6 additional concepts. I think Rick and I will probably be checking those out on Monday. And then possibly, I know they're going to be out there with a drive for the new, factory 392 on Tuesday. So we'll get some good seat time driving around in the new Hemi Wrangler. And yeah, Walker Drugs are going to have everything out on display. So slightly downscaled, but they're still going to be there in force. They're committed to Easter Jeep Safari.
Yeah, and I've heard a rumor that maybe the 4XE may make an appearance in Moab.
It's actually not a rumor. I have confirmation that the EV vehicles will be there.
Awesome. That'll be cool. And maybe if we're lucky,
I'm going to have to reach out to. Oh, sorry. I'm going to have to reach out to Mark Allen because I definitely want to get a ride in the 392 because I've installed, I don't know, close to 200 392s in JKs and JLs. So I want to see how the factory compares with the aftermarket.
Yeah, well, I'm issuing a challenge. Mark, I'll trade you a Jeep, a ride in my Jeep. You can drive my Jeep. I get to drive a 392. I know that it's not
a horsepower difference.
Yeah, but mine's.
You have what, 54? Oh no, you have the
I have an F head.
Oh my gosh, you got 64 ponies under your hood.
Yeah, you can actually get your hair to move.
Well, yeah, with the windshield down.
and speaking of cool things that are going on in the Jeep world, I've heard a rumor that Jeep's coming out with factory half doors and they're on the market. Liam, I think you may have a little inside info on this.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be careful how much I tell you because I have a lot of inside info on this. I may or may not be part of the program professionally. So, yeah, speaking of the 392, there's going to be half doors on the 392 out there that I'm going to be definitely looking at because that's my product right there. Jeep is coming out with half doors, as Rick talked about. It's not a new thing at work. A lot of people are like, why half doors? What are these? And I have to explain to them. And actually, this is going back to our previous conversation. Not all people in the automotive industry are car people. And an even smaller fraction of that is Jeep people. So getting the right Jeep people in the seats in the engineering world is really important. And that's another reason for you to watch that Phil Toney video. Because they talk about that and they talk about some of the opposition you have. And yeah, I get that.
These are people that have never had to unzip a cold zipper on a fabric door to get cash out of the ATM in the middle of winter.
Yes, these are those people. So a lot of people ask me, why half doors? And the reason is because Jeeps have always had half doors in some capacity. And as Rick said, even all the way back, the fabric half doors. The new half doors are going to be really different than the first ones. There's going to be a lot of options. I know that a couple other news outlets have covered the half doors and the prices. Yes, they're expensive. There's no hiding that, but any aftermarket part for your Jeep's going to be expensive. That's just the world we live in. But there's a lot of really cool options. And I think Rick and maybe Chris, you've driven a Jeep with half doors. But they weren't the real ones.
They were on the 392 concept in California when you guys were out there.
Yep. Those were fake half doors. I've driven 2 Jeeps with real half doors. And one thing I can tell you about is they're incredibly light. So, the half door is great because you can take it off, you can throw it in the back, and you can just go on your merry way and be doorless, put them on, put the tops on, it rains, whatever, right? And these are so light. It's I've actually carried one in each hand, just walk around with them because they are using the aluminum construction. Again, they did that for the full doors, which is a great idea to get them on and off. And they're doing it again with the half doors, and they're so light. The other thing you can see in photos is that goofy little door latch that the new doors have in the JL, they didn't put on the half doors. So you're going to have that classic, you open the door, the wind catches it, it smashes the car next to you. You're going to get that again. So don't worry.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, if you're going to go retro, cause body damage, right?
Exactly. That's exactly my thought. I was so excited when I saw that. The other thing that you can find online, so I'm not spoiling anything, is that they have power. And what that means is the power mirrors and the power locks. So if you have a Jeep, supposedly, and this I didn't know until I read the news article, is that if you have a Jeep with manual doors, you still have the wire harness, I guess. And so you can plug into these half doors. And now you have power locks, which is kind of cool. There is no other option. I can tell that with a lot of confidence because, well, I know the doors very well. And there is no manual option. So you're getting power locks and you're getting power mirrors. You are not, however, getting power windows because the windows come off.
What is the point on a power lock or any lock on a
half door with the top off because you
know
over and grab whatever you want?
It's because they needed a place for the wiring harness to go, right?
Right. I don't know. I definitely brought that up at one point. I think that, the upper they're both soft uppers, both the upper and lower level. I mean, a guy with a knife takes your Jeep. I don't know what to tell you, but that's the world.
Yeah.
Well, and adding the power locks to the doors, I understand it. I understand that it's keeping the components similar so that it doesn't raise the cost again. But some people are going to buy a set of half doors and then be upset that their key fob doesn't unlock their doors. Because if they had manual doors in the first place, they're still not going to have the right key fob.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of like having a double door on a barn and you latch the top half but leave the bottom open and expect the goats to stay in the barn.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, that's probably. I think that was in the design criteria.
Goats.
Keep goats out.
Liam, let me ask you this one here. How does the half door and fabric upper compare to your Wrangler YJ with half door and fabric upper? It's the same thing, right?
I don't have a
fabric
fabric
how the new
upper.
doors cost more than his Wrangler.
Yes, there's that.
Just the doors alone. Yeah.
So I actually don't have a fabric upper. I have glass and fiberglass on mine, and it's a little sliding door. So I pull up to the window for fast food. They slide open their window, and I slide open mine. It's excellent.
And I've always liked that upper on the YJ with the little sliding glass.
Mm-hmm.
That was always really a cool thing for me. Because
I remember that the half cab Scout had the sliding rear window.
Yeah. I had a
so did the Bronco.
Oh, come on. Get out of here.
Stop.
Yeah, Tyler's So what I was going to say for our listeners that we kind of giggle about and some of the folks that are watching, when we say Scout or Bronco, you will find on the video that a lot of us are drinking. So that's why this gets funnier as it goes on. So the more we say Scout or Bronco, the more we drink.
Me.
Easy there, cowboy.
You'll notice most of us have.
That's the advantage of watching our YouTube podcast. Is that what it'd be called? Can you call the podcast?
It's a video cast, actually. But yeah.
A video pop? Well, a what?
But it is a videotape.
It's a video cast as well as a podcast. It's
okay.
I thought you said video past. I was like, really? No. That's weird.
Past, like Olympia?
It's past because, we're recording it now and you'll view it later. Scout.
Oh, and I see we're still talking about half doors.
We are still talking about half doors. Liam, you've got a few more tidbits and insights and cool things to tell.
I do. Yep. So 2 more things about the half doors. Greg's over there and he's in a half door boat. That's actually the JK half door. And Rick, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but all the research I did today, I could not find another half door with an armrest built into it. Is that correct? You ever seen one with an armrest?
Yeah, it's right here.
Yeah.
This is the armrest.
But
right here.
I can't remember where. I know JK's do, obviously.
No, not really. Actually, Greg, if you turn it around, it's got a handle, but not really an armrest.
Okay.
Yeah, so the JL half door, if you look up pictures of it, it has a built-in armrest, which I found, I'm a shorter person, and I found that the armrest was perfect for my elbow. My engineer, who I work with at Stellantis, is a taller person, and he found that the top of the door is perfect for his elbow. And so they did a really good job at building a door that is compatible for, all heights, shapes, and sizes of people, which I appreciated.
Here's a question I have for you on that. Is the top of the console the same height as the top of the door or the armrest?
I have no idea. I would guess the armrest.
That's for you to find out for our next podcast.
There we go.
And I need to give kudos to those that are watching the video cast of our podcast. Our man of white, Greg Henderson, is doing a wonderful job showing off the products.
Greg Wilson Henderson right now.
Yes, Wilson Henderson. Hey guys, I think that's probably good for Jeep Beat. I think it's time for a little face-off. How about some Willys versus Wrangler?
Oh, I can do that.
Are we cool with that?
Do it.
Yeah, heck yeah.
All right, our topic today is carburation versus fuel injection. We're going to let Liam take over this time. Fuel injection versus carburation.
Yeah, so he can lose?
Yeah.
Well, he may make some valid points here. You know.
All right, fine. I'll listen.
Hey, it gives the old dude time to formulate his reply and his rebuttal and his debate. Okay? Scout.
Okay. Yeah. You're going to need it.
All right, Liam.
Okay.
You're a fan of fuel injection or what?
I'm going to take fuel injection, but I have like a boatload of disclaimers for this one because last time I didn't do so hot in the competition. So this time I kind of thought through it a little bit more. So the disclaimers are this. Carburation and fuel injection both have their place. And actually, I have a fuel injected YJ and I'm building a carbureted Commando right now. And I have things I love about both of them. So for me to take one side over the other isn't really fair. Also, there's golden years for both. Like you take the time period where emissions really, really choked down the carbureted era and you had vacuum hoses here, there, and everywhere. It's not a great time for fuel for carburation. And then fuel injection, the early days where it's just kind of squirting in the throttle body, and it's not super great. And then even now where it's complicated enough to where you can't work on it in your own garage is not super great either. So with that being said, you know, there's definitely situations where one is a golden year and it might bias your opinion of carburation as a whole or fuel injection as a whole. Now, what I will say from a technical standpoint is carburetors are really, really good at doing a short window of things. And a lot of people will tell me, well, fuel injection sucks because race cars like dragsters, they still use carburetors. And that actually helps my argument for fuel injection because a dragster is designed to run in one scenario. It's designed to go fast at, you know, high RPM. It's designed for one single scenario. And unfortunately, our cars on a daily drive experience thousands of different scenarios, from braking at lights to accelerating fast, accelerating slow, on the highway, going 30 miles an hour, 50, 80, 10, in all different loads. And then we also are slapped with all kinds of emissions and different laws and things that we have to follow to continue building cars in the modern world. That's where fuel injection comes in because it's infinitely tunable. And so I think that fuel injection is really, really good for a daily driver. I daily drive my YJ when I can, especially on the nice days. And I'm so glad it has fuel injection. Carburation is really good for something that you have one use for. Generators have carburetors, lawnmowers have carburetors, race cars have carburetors, and some good off-road Jeeps have carburetors because they're good for one simple thing, and they're really fun to put together. I've been really enjoying the carburetor on the Commando because I have this little block that I put some pieces into, I dropped it on the engine, and it ran. That was really cool. That was so exciting. My YJ is different. It's a lot of wires, it's a lot of other things, but I can take an Arduino and I can tune it and I can make it do different things. And I'm modifying sensors and working on a supercharger and all this other fun stuff.
So you're saying that with the carburetor, you can work on it without having an engineering degree and without having wiring schematics and a computer.
Yeah. However,
which makes it great for a lot of people to not have that.
But being an engineer is awesome, and you should totally do it. So
and I understand that, but you know, you have to you're all glowing for fuel injection when a lot of people, and for 100 years, carburetors worked.
I will argue, though, that for a lot of people, they want to get in the car on any kind of day, 100 degrees outside, -20. They want to get in a car, turn the key, and go and not think about it. The rest is the mechanic's business.
100%.
In other words,
gotten lazy.
Yeah, you need brain dead people. Then is what you're looking for.
But
People have gotten lazy.
I want
That
to
don't look.
I want to jump in here for a second. If given the opportunity to drive anything pre-2000, I mean, even throttle body injection was a little bit more than I wanted to deal with. I would take carbureted over fuel injected out in the middle of nowhere, me by myself, any day of the week.
Yeah. Well, and I'm playing devil's advocate against Liam because I've never rebuilt a carbureted engine, nor have I rebuilt a fuel injection engine. I will put a brand new one of any of those in your custom build for you, but I don't get into them. However, with a carburetor, with a screwdriver and a squirt of gas and a battery, I know I can make it run and drive down the road. So, there's definitely something to be said about that technology that's been great for 100 years. I understand fuel injected is awesome and it does wonderful things, but in a pinch, a carburetor in my world wins every time.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes back to a trip I took to Lake Powell, 350 small block inboard motor. We had gotten stuck out at Rainbow Bridge in a bad storm. Boat owner decided we can make it back to camp, which is 30 some water miles away. And he's like, oh, just get up and plane on these 5-foot waves. We ruptured a fuel cell, decided to leave the next day. It's a carbureted engine. The fuel is in the belly of the boat being pumped out by the bilge. You can open the engine cover, take a plastic red Solo cup, pour fuel in it from the gas can, and get yourself back to the marina so you can get home safely.
Not with fuel injection.
Yeah, not with fuel injection. So
I bet I could find a way.
Rick, your thoughts here,
Okay. So
let's go pro carburetor.
All of you have valid points. The fact of the matter is the only reason you have fuel injection or a carburetor is to mix fuel with air to get to the combustion chamber to go down the road. So they're two entirely different ways to do it. One is a high pressure system where it just squirts fuel injection, or carburetor, which where you put your fuel in the air and it goes into the car, into the engine, it burns and boom, down the road you go, right? That's carburetor.
So you're basically saying squirt gun versus toilet bowl?
Yeah, pretty much. However, you can tune them both. Lynn had a great point. With a fuel injection system, it's infinitely tunable. Well, of course, because it's all these little electronics, zeros and O's, and you can make it 11.1 to 1 for your fuel ratio. Where with the carburetor, you're going to have to sit there with a screwdriver in your ear and maybe an old Sun-tuned machine, which tells you what your exhaust emissions are. So, yeah, one's a little easier, one's a little more difficult. I have found that you can make great inroads with either a carburetor or fuel injection. The reason I like carburetors is because of the reliability aspect, which you and Greg just espoused. Because there's one thing that fuel injection almost always has to have to function, and that's electricity.
So if it goes wrong, it goes really wrong.
It goes way wrong, yes. And while with a carburetor, you don't even need a carburetor. You can have a coffee can with a drip hose dripping into the manifold, and you can get home. And
red Solo cup, stand on the bumper, pull the hood off, you're getting home.
And if you lose your throttle linkage, you can just run a string around through the windshield, through the door, and just fire it up that way with a can on the hood.
That one you can do with fuel injection if you get an old enough vehicle, because I still have cables.
Okay, so here's the fuel injection on an older vehicle that I loved. It was my 1979 VW Rabbit.
Oh.
It was a heck of a car, but it had a 4-cylinder fuel injected, and it was mechanical injection. It had little things that made little other things go to make the pump go squirt, squirt, squirt. So when my battery went, because I had no generator, because I had no fan belt, and I had no lights either, the engine kept running, and down the road
Lights are overrated.
Very cool. Yeah, so I do have to argue, though, that, the carburetor is definitely better if you are in a situation where you're breaking down or things have gone drastically awry. Now, in our situation, we do a lot of off-roading, which means we're in those situations more than normal. Mm-hmm. Now, in a daily driving scenario, if you're not modifying your car, fuel-injected cars are really not that prone to problems, especially now. And so, if you're not getting stuck at the local Walmart with your fuel injected car, whereas you might with a carbureted car, mostly because they're all old by now. That's really the big thing here. And so the other thing is, as Rick was talking about, you're gaining power. So your cylinder is this big, right? And you're filling it with air and fuel, and up to like forced induction turbos and all that other fun stuff. Really, the only way you can gain power is to reduce the number of things that are robbing power from you, right? So wind resistance or brakes, like all sorts of different things. You can reduce the amount of resistance, or you can make that combustion as good as possible. So you can atomize the fuel, you can make sure you got the right ratio, you can get it in there at the right time. And that's where fuel injection really, really takes over, because you can tune a carb to do that in a narrow area. A fuel-injected vehicle, especially the modern ones, can do that all the way across the board. Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing I wanted to hit on with fuel injection too is it's really, I would say fuel injection is the only reason why we still have Jeeps, the Wrangler variant. And the reason being is if you're going to try and drive a brick down the highway and meet emissions and get decent enough gas mileage to where you can still legally sell the thing, you need something like fuel injection. And so we can thank
And you can drive from sea level all the way to the top of 12,000 feet, and it never skips a beat.
You don't have to get out. You don't have to turn a screwdriver. You don't have to know what you're doing.
You can live where I'm at, where technically emissions kind of stop working above, like 7,500, 8,000 feet. So up where I live, you don't have to have an emissions sticker. So
we don't. Well, we're in Michigan. We don't have to have them either.
Yeah, I was about to say.
And we're at sea level. We're at 600 feet.
Yeah,
Tyler,
going back to what Liam said, the reason fuel injection is so important is because of the governmental controls that have been placed on us for emissions and fuel economy. Good or bad, it's nearly impossible to get that kind of fine control with the carburetor over the masses.
Well, I'm just going to state my case here, and this is I guess we'll call it a PG rated show. Mm-hmm. Fly-by-wire sucks. And the government, you want to weigh in on this, Tyler?
I'm fuel injection all the way. I really am. Now, carburation.
And you don't seem like a lazy person.
I'm telling you, I'm thinking of the last time, that I had to use starting fluid on my fuel injected YJ, and it was never.
Oh,
not in the wintertime, not at high altitude, not ever. I just go out, I turn the key, and it starts. And, it's interesting that you mentioned Lake Powell and a boat. I bought a boat last year that's got a fuel-injected 350 Magnum in it. And I've always had carbureted boats. I've never had a fuel-injected boat. And the improvement in fuel economy that I got out of having fuel injection on that boat is astounding. And I go to Lake Powell all the time where gas is sometimes $5, $6 a gallon. Man, it's nice to have that fuel injection. And, it's especially when you look at the fuel injection on a boat, it's not nearly as complicated as it is on a car. There's not all the sensors and everything. It's all little tiny plug and play package. I'm just, man, I mean, it'll run upside down. It'll run sideways, till you run out of oil. But fuel injection doesn't care what orientation the vehicle's in. It runs. It doesn't care what the temperature is outside. It just runs. It doesn't care what the altitude is. It just runs. And and
I'm in the same boat as you. Earlier I said I was playing devil's advocate against Liam, and maybe kind of helping Rick a little bit, but I don't own anything with a carburetor either, unless it's my chainsaw or my lawnmower. So I definitely own everything that's fuel injected, but you got to push both sides of the coin. On a side note, I apologize again. I have to go pick my son up from basketball practice. So I have to say adieu, and thank you everybody for watching the podcast, and stay tuned till the bitter end, because this is just a great, great show.
No problem.
Thanks, Greg. We appreciate you being here.
Yep. See you next week. Bye.
Yeah. All right. So now I'm going to tell you all about my fuel injection startups where I had to use ether on top of a mountain because this one guy had a CJ7 with fuel injection, and he had talked all week on this trip about how great it was, blah, blah, blah. Well, we got up one morning when it was about 20 degrees outside, about 9,000 feet, and wouldn't start. Just crank. And I'm going, well, what's the problem? And he goes, well, it just won't start. I said, well, you got spark? Yeah, I got spark. Okay. Got gas? Well, of course. I filled it up before we left. I said, well, is it squirting in? Can you tell? Well, I don't know. Of course he didn't, right? So I hit the little pressure thing, Schrader valve, and nothing came out. And I said, well, I wonder if you have to have some sort of pressure before the fuel pump kicks in. Maybe there's a residual thing. I don't know. He didn't know. He just bought the thing. So I got out my ether and I poked a hole in his plenum with a ice pick because that's all I had. Stuck the little hose in there and squirted it. And I said, start it. And it started right up. So, yes, there's been more than one time where I used ether to start a fuel-injected engine.
I've got a 2000 fuel-injected vehicle. I live at a little over 9,000 feet, wintertime, and it's been started more than once on ether.
On ether, yeah.
On ether.
So now, what I will say is it doesn't – basically, fuel injection is not the panacea that a lot of people think it is. Oh, it'll fix this, it'll fix that, you'll get better mileage, you'll get this. Overall, yes, there's a place for fuel injection, and I'm all for it. In fact, I'm going to try to modify a Holley product, maybe on Tracy's Jeep, which is a one-barrel F-head, and that's going to be
we did get, and we should probably call Holley about that. They've got a little one-barrel fuel injection unit.
And
that might be interesting.
It might be interesting. And one of the reasons is because the carburetor that she runs is an old Holley that was designed for Scouts International bread truck.
Oh.
An old Ford Falcons. That's just bad.
Yeah.
I can't say I hate fuel injection by any stretch of the imagination. But last podcast, Crowley was talking about how he wanted something that he could push start. Oh, because it had a manual transmission, right? You were looking for that reliability. And I think that's the difference with a carburetor. They're reliable. They'll still get you home. Not to say that it won't with fuel injection. If you have a throttle body fuel injection and it doesn't work, take that sucker off, put a coffee can with a hose, dribble it in there, and you'll get home.
Well, if I knew tomorrow was going to be the zombie apocalypse, I'd probably snag my CJ2A, long before I would snag my 92 YJ.
There you go.
But because, you can repair anything on that CJ with like a crescent wrench and a screwdriver. But
absolutely.
For
exactly. And
99% of my driving and rock crawling and trail riding, I just love the convenience and the ease of use and kind of the fix it and forget it of a fuel injection. It's just, I just like it.
Yeah,
Well,
and I will say that the one big downfall as far as fix it on the trail or issues you can have with fuel injection is it does require pressure, whereas a carburetor you can just kind of dribble fuel in there and you're good to go. So the fuel injection, it does require a pressurized system, which that could cause you trouble on the trail. So I'll definitely admit that. And as Tyler said, the fix it and forget it thing. I told you guys on the first podcast, I started with my Jeep not knowing anything about cars. I did a lot wrong and didn't know it because the fuel injection system compensated for it. And that is a nice thing. So if I'm in there tinkering, if I do something wrong, it actually said, "Oh, okay, you poor thing. Here you go. Here we'll still run for you."
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it was 2 years ago or 2 years ago, we had a day that I think we got down to like -60 or something super cold here. And I said, you know what? And my engine had about 50 pounds of compression on all 4 cylinders. It was very tired. I said, you know what? This thing's never failed me yet. Let's try it out today. And, the crank was real slow, but it fired right up and it just kept on going. And, that's the kind of thing I said at the beginning is there are some golden years. I would consider the YJs and TJs as a golden year for fuel injection because it's simple enough. You can still work on it at home and it's still got the sensors and things to where it's going to run somewhat efficiently. And then like the TJs, they have the OBD2, so you can get cheap scanners. We put fuel injection on our 70s ambulance and we got a tablet with it. And my buddy was going down the road and he had actually run one of the fuel lines too close to the header and he lost fuel pressure and it wasn't running. And he looks over at the tablet and within 30 seconds, he knew exactly what was going wrong. He didn't have to pop the hood. He didn't have to, test a bunch of things, get out a bunch of tools. He knew right away that he was vapor locking and he remembered that he ran the fuel line too close to the header just because the sensor readout was able to tell him. So there's definitely advantages to it. But I agree that, when you're out in the middle of nowhere or you're modifying things or doing something you shouldn't, a carburetor is going to be a lot more forgiving to the backyard mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
So Rick, one of the things that you actually, Tyler with the, or Liam with the fuel injection versus Rick with the carburetor. And one of the things I think maybe we forget is that not everybody wants to or can work on their vehicles. I mean, they want something that runs and, the late model fuel injection systems. I'm a mixed bag. I got carburetors, I've got fuel injection, but when fuel injection started coming in the 80s, it made me nervous. I'm like, this is something I can't work on when I get down in the middle of Baja or someplace in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I've had people ask me, it's like, okay, if you're going to drive around the world, would you want something with fuel injection or do you want a carburetor? And you know what? Depending on the vehicle, it's like I could go both ways because the new fuel injection systems are so efficient and they become very, very reliable. And as a devil's advocate to myself, a carburetor, like this Jeep sitting behind me, I can work on that. I can take it apart with basic hand tools. In fact, this vehicle, it actually was one just like it in the middle of the Andes in 1999, was heating up. I got a vapor lock and had no tools. All I had was my Leatherman. And that's because my tools were in another vehicle that I lost touch with. But, basically myself and my riding buddy, Brian, we pulled the hood off, rerouted the fuel lines, put it back together, and we were able to, keep moving just on very basic tools. So, but the bottom line is most people don't work on cars.
Well, that's absolutely true. Most people don't have the ability. It's like the classic meme where guy's standing on the side of the road. He opens up the hood and looks at it. Next guy comes up, just looks at it and says, "Yep, used to be able to fix these."
Right.
But all you can do is look at it.
On that same note, a guy with a carburetor that has problems with it, he may not know a wing nut from a lug nut, but I would probably guarantee maybe not with the new generation. Sorry, Liam, not with the new generation, but somebody's going to come along and look at that and like, oh yeah, Holly carburetor, I can take the, dive in there and you got something clogging your jets, you got junk in your bowl. Somebody can, is going to come, you know what I meant, Rick?
Sounds like a problem from Colorado. I got junk in my bowl.
Yeah, right.
All right, guys. I think we've debated this in a long time, and I think we're going to let our listeners and our viewers decide who actually won this argument, because everybody had a really valid point, but I want to leave everybody with one thought. Most of us, with the exception of Chris, were at Fall Color Tour. Remember the squeezy bowl or the squeezy ball and the fuel line.
Yep. Hand pump.
The electric pump and the pump and then the replacement electrical pump all failed.
Exactly.
Yep. So he had his girlfriend sitting there.
Exactly. It may have been a fuel pump problem, but they were running a carburetor and they got it back to the ranch. All right, guys.
I could do 30 psi by pump.
I don't know. I can make a rude and crude and totally socially unacceptable comment, but we are running a PG podcast, so I will keep my comments to myself.
Fair enough.
All right, that was an awesome Willys versus Wrangler. Again, we're going to let our listeners and our viewers make the decision on who won that argument, old school versus the new guys. Hey, Liam, I think you did pretty good. You had a very valid argument.
Hey, I appreciate it, Tracy. And all you guys watching, if you are in a place where you can comment, make sure to comment below that I definitely won that one. I do have a lot of Moab prep to do, so I'm going to have to go and tune in later to listen to this next segment on these straps. This is something that I definitely need to learn, but I'm going to leave and have to listen to it later. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks, Liam. We appreciate it. Have a great evening, and we'll see you in Moab in, can you believe it, just a little over a month?
It's crazy.
Thanks, guys. All right, we're getting ready for some toolbox talk. Today we have got recovery straps, toe straps versus kinetic straps. What to use in what situation, maintenance versus replacement, et cetera, and so on. We are going to let Tyler and Chris take over on this segment. Take it away, guys.
All right. Hey, Tyler, you want to jump into that one?
Yeah, let me start with some of the technical aspects of webbing. That's probably more where my expertise lies, and then you can kind of go over more of the real world use of these straps. But I've to kind of preface this, I've been in the sewing industry in either a full or a part-time capacity since I was 15 years old. So that's about 30 years. And I've sewn lots and lots and lots of webbing in my time. So let me just kind of give a blank overview or an overview of some of the materials you're dealing with. So the two primary materials you're going to be dealing with are nylon-based webbings and then poly-based webbings, polypropylene. And there are some newer things on the market now, some Dyneema and some things like that. But basically, the things you need to know about between nylon and polypropylene, nylon is stronger for the same weight, and it has a slightly higher melting point. However, nylon is also hydrophilic, meaning it loves water. So the fibers in nylon will actually absorb water. They are also more susceptible to UV damage. They will degrade in the sun faster. Polypropylene is much more UV resistant. It doesn't absorb moisture like nylon does, but it is not as strong for the same weight, and it has also got a slightly lower melting point. I tell you all that so that you know that if you end up with a nylon strap, don't ever leave it in the sun. Don't ever store it somewhere where it can be exposed to water for a long period of time, and don't leave it out in the sun. You will severely degrade its integrity and its strength by leaving it in the sun. You'll notice nylon straps fade quite a bit faster than polypropylene. Most of your soft tops, and especially Bimini tops on boats, they all use polypropylene webbing, no nylon, because of the moisture problem and because of the sun problem. That also extends to your stitching. So if you have a polypropylene toe strap that has nylon stitching and you leave it in the sun, the stitching will rot out long before the webbing does. The only other thing I would caution as well is dirt and particles, sand and little bits of mud particles getting into the webbing. Acts basically, it works its way into the fibers of the webbing, and it acts like a continual sandpaper as the webbing comes into use. So if your straps get really muddy because you're yanking something, when do you use your straps? Usually when somebody's stuck in a big mud hole. You need to make sure that you thoroughly clean them, let them dry completely, but in the shade. Don't dry them in the sun. And then the last thing I'd tell you is that over normal use, the straps just degrade over time. The literature that I'm holding a piece of 1-inch tubular webbing. This is webbing used in the climbing industry. And some tests that some safety companies have done revealed that their nylon tubular webbing tended to lose about 1.5% of its strength every year over normal use. So they do degrade over time and over use. The last thing I would tell you is kind of the difference between a static and a dynamic rope. And this extends to like in the snatch strap industry, they call them kinetic, but it just means, all that means is that it stretches. A static rope has no stretch to it at all. Think of it like a chain, whereas a dynamic rope has stretch to it, and it's meant to store some of that potential energy as you're yanking them out of the hole, and then it slings back like an elastic band and helps to remove a vehicle. Rock climbers will tell you never lead a climb on a static rope, because if you fall, all of the force is going through your harness and all of it's stitching into your body. And that's how you end up breaking pelvises and backs and spines and things. So lead climbers always use a dynamic rope. Why? So if they take a big fall, the rope will stretch and absorb most of that fall energy rather than jolting them in their gear and sending all that into their body. So that same concept applies with snatch straps, the difference between, say, a tow rope and a snatch rope. So that's probably enough for the technical jargon. I'm going to hand it over to Chris here and let him tell you kind of where the rubber meets the road on this stuff.
Yeah, Tyler, you bring up some really, really good points. The background, when I was, much younger, I found this yellow strap, a trucker strap on the side of the road, and I was like, hey, I just got my rig, and I'm like, hey, it's a free strap. It's like $30, because they sold the Tug'em straps, the ones you find at the auto parts store, the yellow ones, 2-inch, 20 feet long or 30 feet long. And I was quickly edified that when I pulled somebody, it kind of, pulled somebody out, but there was a lot of what we call shock load on the body, on the vehicle, and the attachment points. And I soon learned that, the kinetic, or they just called them a toe strap or a recovery strap, had stretch to it. So the rubber band effect, huge. I actually did a very comprehensive destructive test a few years ago on recovery gear. So I had equipment from most of the main manufacturers out there: straps, ropes, soft shackles, hard shackles, and basically we took them to a certified slings in Florida, and we put them on their 50-foot test bed, and we broke everything. And I learned a lot doing that review. And one of the big things was that there is no, if you're dealing with slings or anything that has to do with load, like the shipping industry or lifting industry, those are all certified. So they have to run through a certification process. They are given a rating, a working load limit, and a maximum braking strength or a minimum braking strength. And they also have a safety factor, which is a percentage above that. What we have in the recovery strap industry is nothing. So there is no standard certification or regulatory body that says you advertise 18,000 pounds, MBS or minimum braking strength on your strap, that it will, hold up to 18,000 pounds. So we thought it would be fun to break everything and find out exactly if where the line is on truth in advertising, so to speak. And it was, pretty educational. What we found was that most of the products survived. Most of them survived what their advertised minimum braking strength was. But because there is no working load limit, which means a load that you can apply or a given strain load to a strap repeatedly again and again and again, and without damaging it. Really interesting. Some of our findings were, and I'm going to just bring up a quick screen share so anybody watching the YouTube video can see this. And if you're not, I'm going to walk you through it. But we were like I said, we were in Florida on this 50-foot test bed at Certified Slings, and they have this is what they do. This is their business. They certify lifting equipment. And what we found was let me pull up one of these shots here, is that when you brought a product to somewhere around 80% of its advertised minimum braking strength, you would start to hear fibers pop. So it would go pop, 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 pop slowly, and that basically is not a problem. It was basically the threads, just a millimeter difference in the threads equalizing, and the shorter ones would pop or break. But when you got into the 85% range, say you have a 20,000 pound strap braided, and you get up around the 17,000 pound mark on it, that strap, the integrity of that material is completely compromised. And for those of you that are just listening over the podcast, it basically comes out with like a piece of that hard candy that your grandma used to have. It's kind of ripply. And what it means is this thing has been brought beyond what would be considered a working load limit or something that can be repeated over and over. And it's time to throw this thing in the trash.
It's kind of like taking a pair of scissors to a piece of ribbon on a Christmas package or a birthday package and pulling it to make that curl.
That's, great visualization. So it's interesting. We don't, in practical application, we don't find ourselves pushing that equipment to that level, often, but it definitely happens. But thing is, like, who are they advertising? When you get a 30,000 pound strap, what is it actually good for? The other thing we found was that even if the webbing material broke, we also found that a lot of the stitching had already been compromised. It was already starting to come apart, before we hit that minimum braking strength. Some of them went beyond it, but bottom line is our industry needs some type of regulatory agency. The other thing what we found is we put snatch blocks on a machine that would basically pull them apart, different machine. And some of them, when we took them up to 1.5 times their advertised load rating. But for example, this one, it's all one of them. This one got all pear shaped. So by the time we actually got to where its advertised point, it was toast. And it's basically, it's not it's a knockoff. It's a knockoff of the old Warren style recovery blocks. But bottom line is, not a lot of truth in advertising in straps. And I talked to many manufacturers, and they all, most of them said the same thing. They were like, well, there's no real, there's no agency or requirement on it. I'm like, well, where were your products tested? And most of them, a few of them test everything. But most of them just, they buy the material, they have it made overseas, and you kind of don't know what you're getting.
Chris, if I can jump in there real quick. This is a difference between the military and the civilian market on this. The military actually has a mil spec, and it designates the size of thread in the stitching, the number of stitches per inch, how long the tail has to be, how far back on the webbing it goes, if it has to be a double wrap or a single wrap. I mean, it's very specific, and none of that exists in this civilian market.
No, it doesn't. It does not. And, it's kind of an eye-opener for me, with the testing. So in application, though, if you have an 18,000-pound strap or rope, and like you said, it's 6 to 1 and half dozen of the other. If they're kinetic, they're kinetic. That means that they have elasticity. But one of the things that in the lab, when they're testing these, if they test them, that's under perfect conditions. So this is under that strap being held by a jig, which is absolutely perfectly square with the other jig holding the other end of it as they pull it apart. How often does that happen on the trail?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got your buddy's Jeep getting ready to slide off a cliff edge where he's going to drop 300-400 feet, how much do you really want to trust some of that stuff? And I want to interject, those of you that are listening, I highly, highly suggest to you to jump on our YouTube channel, check out the video cast of this. If it means you've got to jump forward, however many minutes in the cast itself, some of these visuals that Chris is showing is very, very, very informative. And it could at some point in time come down to life or death. So I highly suggest watching the video cast, at least of the Toolbox Talk segment.
Yeah, that's a good point, Trace. And so back to my question, how often do we actually have this perfect lab conditions in the field? And but the answer is we don't. It never happens. So if you run, for example, you run your strap through a bow shackle like this, the contact surface is being put into kind of convex shape, and one end of the edge of that strap is being pulled at earlier than the middle of the strap. So it is starting to take all the load and all gets squinched down, but there's no equalization or equal tension or load on that strap. So portions of it are going to be compromised before the center will. So it's really, I'm going to jump back into another. The other thing is, we'll wrap them through, you see people wrap them through a leaf spring or anything that they can just hang their, that strap around. They'll say, oh yeah, well, that's fine. Yeah, just put it there. It's like, well, you got to look at what you're attaching it to. Can that part of the vehicle, the frame, the spring, a hook, look at some of the cheesy little hooks that they use these days. Will that hold up to the load you're going to impose on it? Or will it just, pretzel and send your strap and all that energy and anything connected to it flying? So it's one of the things that, Tyler, jump in.
Well, not only that, but you're also creating an intense stress riser on the webbing, across the surface of the webbing. When you make that webbing go around a sharp right angle, like the edge of a spring or around a bumper that has sharp corners, you're creating a huge stress riser across the surface of that webbing. It's like, rock climbers don't like knots, because where does a rope break? It breaks at the knot. Fishermen, where does your line break? It breaks at the knot. You're creating a concentration of stress. And so, rock climbers have a whole system of knots that they use. If they have to use a knot, they have very specific ones that they use to tie into their carabiners or tie into their safety, tie into their harness. They use a rewoven figure of 8 because it still reduces the rope strength, but it's the least damaging to the strength of the rope. They have certain ways they type webbing so that it still creates a weak point, but it weakens the rope the least. So if all you've got to get your buddy out is 2 pieces of webbing or 2 pieces of toe strap that you had to tie together because it broke in the middle, if it's all you've got, it's all you've got. But understand, you're creating a very dangerous situation. You better have something over the top of that strap to absorb the shock when it breaks again, because it's probably going to break at that knot. And so taking webbing around sharp corners through a shackle over a piece of a leaf spring, you got to keep in mind that you're creating a huge stress riser, and you've greatly reduced, even though the webbing's rated at 20,000 pounds, you've just cut that by maybe a factor of 2 or more by running it over the corner.
Take a doubled up piece of duct tape, just fold it back on itself on the sticky side, and go out to the front step, if you've got concrete steps, and run it back and forth like you're shining your shoes a few times. And what's it going to do to the fiber of that duct tape?
Kills it.
Exactly.
While we're on that subject, Tyler, let me jump back into another screen share. And so for those of you who are listening, we're going back into the lab, and we're looking at a whole bunch of different straps. We got recovery straps, we've got winch line extenders, and we're looking at this and what do they all have in common? And go ahead, Rick.
No knots.
They don't have any knots, and the ends, the eyelet on the ends, they're all doubled up. So you got double layers of material on the ends, or it's folded over and stitched. And if we're looking at single stitching or double stitching, the stitching is surprisingly important. And we found as some of the straps would break mid-span on the webbing, and some of them, the stitching would just come apart. But they all have a reinforced eyelet, and that's why it's really important that we use this eyelet. Give you an example, the rope, like a recovery rope, we set up a jig, which basically looked kind of like the drum of a winch. And we brought those ropes, actually the straps and ropes. Now straps were going over this drum, the steel drum, perfectly flat. So it wasn't putting any extra pressure on any portion of the strap. The ropes, however, it's just spooled up like a winch line. And when we brought the recovery rope on this 5-inch round steel drum to its full or close to its full minimum breaking strength, it generated so much tension or pressure, which equated to heat, that it melted the rope. So it came out, the sections of this rope came out as just like basically bent in half like they were wrapped around a drum and then melted with a lighter. Couldn't see it from the outside, but it had a big squiggly in it when we actually took it off. So that's one of those things that we think about. It's like it's really important to use the equipment exactly how it was supposed to be used and hooking up with the end of it rather than trying to, sometimes we'll double up. You want to double up a strap and you just run it through a bow shackle or some other component. And let me just jump out of my screen share here. And so it compromises, it can compromise the recovery, it can compromise everybody's safety. And you end up basically needing to replace your equipment prematurely.
And speaking of maintenance and replacement, how often should you really consider replacing your recovery straps or your recovery ropes or your soft shackles or even your bow shackles, your metal parts? I mean, they do get stressed after a while if you're using them enough.
Well, let's jump into that, Tyler. You want to jump in there first, or you want to? I can tell you cleaning and maintenance.
The old adage and like you said, many, many, many years ago when I was a rock climber, the old adage was if you took a big fall on a rope, you never used it again. Now, there are guys that go, and I think this is mostly an operation of how often you use it, but let's say you use your recovery equipment a lot. You're like those guys down in Australia that are going down to Tasmania and they're going mud hole after mud hole and they're using their kinetic straps 2 or 3 times a trip and they're taking several trips a year. those guys need to replace their gear every season to be safe, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
They should replace it every season, and they should inspect it between every trip. And if it's fraying or stitching is breaking, then they got to replace it more often than that, but at least every season. For the guy that uses, you use your recovery strap only very occasionally, and you've been pretty religious about not letting it get wet and mildewy, or leaving it get in the sun, or leaving a lot of dirt in it. That strap, I would still probably replace it. I don't know, Chris, what would you say, every 5 years or so?
I think it's about maintenance, and it's about the types of loads that you put on it. It's like changing the oil in your car. When you get done with it, like you said, Tyler, you can't leave it muddy. I mean, we take these things out. You can't shove them in a box in the back of your Jeep, wet and mildewy, and just expect that you're going to pull it out and it's going to be 100%. But I want to actually brought some other props. So I'm a mixed bag. This strap right here, this is an ARB strap. It's 3-inch. I don't remember the rating on it, probably 20,000 pounds. I've had it for about 15 years, probably more. This is the toughest strap I can imagine. It has been dragged through the mud. It has been wrapped around the wheels. It does have a couple of little nicks in it. It's been an amazing product. Should I replace it? I just pulled it out of my rig to come up here. This is one of these things that's like always in my rig. It's not the only one. I have a couple of other straps that I use, but as far as replacing it, this thing is held out exceptionally well. I mean, if you look close at the stitching is good. I mean, there's, like I said, there's a few places where it got dinged a little bit. So I can't really put a number on that, Tyler, on when you should replace it, when you feel it has been compromised. And
it's tough.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of playing it safe here, and that is always throw something over the strap like you would a winch cable. Always throw something over the strap, especially a kinetic strap, because the whole point of the kinetic strap is it's going to store a bunch of elastic energy and then help yank the other vehicle out. Well, it gets to full extension and then snaps. It's going to be like a bullet going both directions.
Yeah, I mean, how many times, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners grew up with, and viewers grew up with slingshots. How many times could you stretch that slingshot out and, shoot at a target or whatever you were shooting at, and then you pull back that one time and the rubber snaps?
Yeah.
It gets you right in the nose.
Gets you in the nose, comes back, smacks you on the wrist. It's a painful experience. And you just think about the fact that that's your two hands, and you've got your $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 built Jeep pulling out your buddy's $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 rig. And all of a sudden that rope or strap breaks at the wrong time and somebody goes over the edge of something.
Yeah. And maybe I'm a little bit hypocritical. I love that strap, and it has been tough as nails.
You'll be buried with it, Chris.
Yeah, probably. But a lot of the newer straps, even the ARB straps, again, the other one that's in one of my rigs is one of their new models, and it's made a little bit differently. It's a little bit softer. They started making straps that were more compliant and easy to use. They basically follow about the same rating. I think this is 22,000 pounds. But again, it's like any piece of equipment. If you feel like it needs maintenance, it needs to be worked on. And usually with a strap, maintenance means replacement.
Well, it's one thing I like to say, just like what Tyler was saying. Would you go rock climbing with ropes that you've had 10 years and maybe had a couple of falls on them? Well,
no.
It might be okay. I love this rope. I'm not going to give it up.
Okay. Now, get your
but
point.
You got to ask yourself.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
You know, they're
The other thing,
Expensive to get a new one, but what's it
and,
worth?
you know, and I have new stuff sitting in my shop. You know, I always use that. Love it.
Admittedly, all my
Yeah.
new stuff is in the shop too, and I'm still carrying around my 20-year-old straps that
Right.
work great. Yes.
Right. So
Yeah,
let's
I
jump
know.
into this other subject. Sorry, Trace, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say you get comfortable with it. It's kind of like your favorite hoodie or sweatshirt or
Whoopee.
your favorite. Yeah,
Yeah.
favorite whoopee, and you just want that because you know it, you're familiar with it, and it's wonderful. But sometimes whoopee doesn't come into play when it's a life or death situation. It's the
exactly right.
comfort thing after you get out of the death situation.
So I found that whenever I pull out like a Scout or a Bronco, it's infected.
Ah,
It's infected, and you have to change it.
mhm.
So let's talk real quick. You mentioned something, Tyler. We're talking about elasticity in a strap, and one of these is a 2-inch, one's a 3-inch. So Tracy, you talked about your full size truck. This is the thing. It's like bigger is not always better. And
No, but I'm also one that errs on the side of caution.
well, you can. This is giving me my point. Is that if designed the way they're built to be used, the strap that's going to pull out your full size double cab pickup is not the strap that would be ideal to pull out a Suzuki Samurai or a lighter vehicle, so to speak, because the elasticity has a lot to do with the load being put on it, and you're not going to put as much load on something pulling out a lighter vehicle, and it's going to be it's going to be more of a shock load applied to the attachment points, everything involved with the system.
Yeah, I mean my recovery kit would hold one of each: a kinetic strap for certain situations and a flat toe strap for other situations. I look at it from multiple levels, where I live and different situations, not just wheeling or mud situations, but I live in big snow country. And you get the odd neighbor that comes around the corner off the hill too fast and he slides into the ditch he doesn't realize is actually 3 feet deeper than the 4-foot pile of snow that's on top of it, and he gets buried. So, I can stand at the kitchen window and I can look out there and they're struggling, whether it be a Subaru, a Toyota. Ooh, we should drink on Toyota too. Sorry, Chris.
But my point is that a 30,000 pound strap it'll work for both situations, where maybe a lighter strap, a 14,000 or 12,000 pound strap, is not the thing you want for your double cab full size truck. But the elasticity factor is that if it's being used, you have the appropriate strap for the appropriate weighted vehicle and load you're going to apply to it. That's the key. Not always ideal in the field.
Right. And, here pulling something out of ice and snow, you're going low and slow. You get to that tight point and then you apply a little power. Mud, where it's sucking mud, you've got to pull from a different standpoint. You've got to have a little momentum when you hit it. If you got somebody that has gotten high centered over a rock and they're playing turtle and you just need to get them pulled back, that's a whole different tow scenario.
Absolutely.
Chris, let me correct me if I think what you were referring to as well was, if I understand this correctly, was tailoring the strap to the load you plan to use it on. Like, you wouldn't put a leaf spring off a 1-ton truck on a flat fender, because it does have spring to it, but the flat fender's so light, you might as well have no suspension at all. So you would tailor the strength of your strap to what you anticipate its usage to be. Am I hitting that?
Yeah, that's pretty close. It's not that you need to carry 4 straps for 4 different types of vehicles. I mean, bottom line is a large 30,000-pound strap is going to work for both scenarios. It's just that it's not going to have the elasticity when you're tugging out a lighter vehicle as it would if you're pulling out a Ram 3500. Yeah,
you don't pull out
elasticity factor
100 with a light little strap.
Right.
And I think a lot of it also has to do with throttle control on the recovery vehicle too. So I mean,
better know what you're doing.
I'm not going to hit 4 low and floor it with my Hemi to pull out my flat fender.
Well,
I'm going to ease into that a little bit.
That's a whole other campfire conversation is, technique and method rather than just the hardware that you use.
Absolutely. And I think we could go on for hours and hours and hours on this. And
we could. Let's take
have to call this fireside talk instead of tech.
Yeah. Let's take a quick minute to talk about soft shackles. We've all used them. I want to hear what Rick's thoughts are. The soft shackle, like this gator jaw, it's made by Bow Rope.
Yeah.
Versus a good old-fashioned bow shackle.
Yeah, you betcha. I'm going to say soft shackles have their place in the world.
And where is that place, Rick?
He's like, and that place is the garbage can.
I put it on my roll bar because it makes the absolute best handhold ever.
All right.
No, seriously, they do have a place. They do have a use. I think it was a problem that wasn't there that someone had to solve. And
no recovery points. That's the problem. Vehicles with no recovery points. You've got to have something.
You're right. They're out there. The other problem is, of course, it's still a nylon composite plastic thing. So if you put it around a sharp corner, it's ruined. Okay, but it's a lot better than nothing. And the thought behind it and the tightening up and everything, yeah, it works fine. But I don't know. I wheeled for 100 years before those were ever invented through every kind of scenario ever, and I never needed one. Do I need one now? Well, of course, because you gotta have them.
I saw a few instances on Chinaman's Trail on the Fall Color Tour where there weren't recovery points on a Jeep coming up the first obstacle, and that was needed because there was absolutely no place other than, I mean, I would rather ruin a soft shackle versus a toe strap from having to loop it around the bumper.
Agreed.
Tyler, what are your thoughts on soft shackles?
Yeah, I think Tracy kind of hit it on the head. If you don't have recovery points, they do give you a few more options. There's a couple things you need to really be careful about, though. Nylon against nylon will cut through itself and melt through the fibers extremely quick, and that doesn't necessarily need to be over a long distance. It can just be from pressure and heat and internal friction. And so you got to be real careful about rubbing nylon against nylon. And most of those soft shackles have protective coverings on them and stuff, but you need to worry about that. Like Rick said, I wonder if it wasn't a solution looking for a problem, but they do seem to me that if one of those failed, it would be less of a grenade than if a standard steel bow shackle failed.
Agreed.
It doesn't have the potential to throw shrapnel.
Yeah,
so I think they do have their place. They're lighter weight than bow shackles for the same rating of strength. So
personally, I've used soft shackles more to keep my toe straps from getting all tangled up and spread out all over the place.
They're real handy for hooking up the roll cages.
Oh, absolutely. No, don't get me wrong. I think it's a fine product, especially the gator jaw. I mean, I do love the type and design and everything else. It's like when it's another tool in your box. Okay, when they first came out with a ratcheting box end wrench, what was that? 10 years ago? Well, who the heck would need that? Oh my gosh, did I fall back into that's one of the greatest inventions ever.
Well, it's like those.
We all have ratcheting box end wrenches now.
Well, it's like those 4 foot long needle nose vice grips that I gave you that one time.
Yeah. Never in the
Rick,
world would I have thought I needed that.
Time is going by, buddy. Rick, that was 1995, I think, and that was gear wrench that patented.
When gear wrench invented those.
And it took me 10 years before I
10
accepted
years.
it. What?
I think no, it was 25 years ago.
Yeah, no, those are great things.
So my point is, somebody brought that up. It's like, this is the deal. I love the soft shackles. I got a bunch of them. Some from Gator Jaw. These are ones that Factor 55 puts out. So when we did that test, we actually used the Gator Jaw as a jig because this particular product failed at 41,111 pound load. It was
Wow.
Yeah. And so
To me, that's not a failure. So,
well, it's not. It wasn't a
I
failure
mean,
at all. That's just,
if you're pulling a semi or a train, a locomotive engine or something, okay.
But my point being, I think, Tyler, you brought this up, is that if you're using it to attach things together, I mean, the idea of keeping hard metal items out of a recovery scenario or a setup, to me, it's a big deal. So I love them. I use them all the time. They're tough. They're easy to use. And I have yet to have one fail. And it's really easy to put them into any recovery situation, or if you got some funky attachment points, versus our old standard, which I carry both. So as far as the soft shackles, I'm a fan.
I carry them in my
huge
kit.
fan.
2 or 3 I carry in my recovery kit every time I go wheeling.
Yeah, and I mean, I have both. So, when the situation presents itself and I can use a bow shackle, I use it. But if I've got to use a soft shackle, then I use it. I've got one.
right.
Yeah, we usually use a bow shackle as the attachment point on the vehicle.
Mhm.
Bumper comes out, put it through. It's into a bolted, welded surface on the vehicle on the frame. But anything out, what I say is out in the field, I'm going to probably opt for a soft shackle.
I'm a huge fan of the soft shackle because it would actually speed up the process of getting 20 plus rigs up an obstacle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Operate much faster.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a whole lot easier to stick a soft shackle in your back pocket for the next assist up the obstacle than it is a bow shackle. So
Want to throw it at somebody down the trail, you don't have to worry about breaking their windshield.
that's very true. Very true.
Or their teeth.
All right, guys. Are we still going?
No, it's going to go into I think maybe we'll do this hardware on another episode because we should talk about,
Yeah, I think we should get into.
We got some really cool stuff like winching plates and, different types of blocks. The new trend towards getting rid of your hook on your winch line and put something like the Factor 55 unit on it. That's pretty
I
much
think
swept the world.
I think a future segment should be talking about winches, and we can get into that and synthetic versus steel cable.
Oh,
There we go. Sounds good.
nylon melts. What'd you say? No, let's wait. Let's wait
Yes.
on that
Wait.
whole discussion.
let's give everybody something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And let's get
I'll
some.
brush up on my
questions.
Dyneema tech because most of those are Dyneema, but I'll brush up on my tech a little bit.
Okay.
Good.
I
Well, if you have any
think
questions, let me know.
yeah, and if any of our listeners or viewers have any questions, definitely drop us an email, send us a direct message, comment on a YouTube video, send a carrier pigeon, dog sled, snail mail, whatever it is. I think that's going to take care of this issue of Toolbox Talk, and I think Michael's got to get heading down the trail.
I think we all do. We're sitting here with a what is it? We have to go scout something.
Need more coffee.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I got to sign off. It's climbing on Cordal 9 p.m. here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been actually a really good. I think it's been a really good podcast. We got a lot of ground covered. Probably threw out a lot more questions than maybe we even answered, which is kind of cool for our audience.
Yeah,
They can ask
absolutely.
us.
And looks like again, Trailside is going to have to wait, and light bars before lockers, or lockers before light bars, or Scout, Bronco.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to go scout out a dinner.
Oh,
Oh,
Empty. I'm all
Might have
out.
to take a Bronco to get there. I don't know.
wow.
I think we're going to need a big slurping sound effect for
Yeah,
somebody.
we're all out.
or guzzling or pop top or something like that. But I think that stuff's going to have to wait till the next episode. We sure are a long-winded bunch. We get to Jack John about one thing or another, and we just don't know when to shut up.
Yeah, pretty much. That's Jeeping, though.
That is definitely. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in for, can you believe it, episode 3 of the Gone Jeepin' Show.
Wow.
3.
Yeah.
We're going to have some fun stuff coming up for you, and we're hoping to go live with the podcast at Easter Jeep Safari 2021. If you guys are going to be out there, definitely drop us a comment. And like I said, we hope to have maybe a live meet and greet. Join us for our podcast, and maybe we'll just make it all lockers before light bars. Just nothing but Q&A from fans and viewers and friends and whatnot. And
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Rick Payway for Gone Jeepin'.
I'm Tracy Clark, your co-host for Gone Jeepin'.
And thank you, Mike, Tyler, and Chris for hanging in there for the rest of the show. And join us in 2 weeks. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Absolutely. We're Gone
Okay.
Jeepin'. Scout.
I'm empty.
I'm done too.
Bye, everybody.
On the next episode of the Gone Jeepin' Show, we'll have lockers before light bars, where we will answer some of our fans' questions. Willys versus Wrangler. Rick Payway faces off against the new guys, old school versus modern technology. And Trailside, where we will discuss some of our favorite trails and trips we'd like to take. Thanks for joining us on the Gone Jeepin' Show. We'll see you at the next episode. We're all Jeep all the time.